It's August, which means it also happens to be my birthday month. I can think of no better way to celebrate a little bit early than to bake a cake. It's 4 layers, it's filled, it's frosted, it's fruity. I hope you'll stick with me today to bake my ultimate birthday cake. Hey there, welcome back to my kitchen. I'm really happy to have you here. Today I am baking my ultimate birthday cake. This one is summer on a plate. It's a lemon cake with vanilla buttercream frosting and layered with alternating layers of lemon curd and raspberry filling. Light, tangy, sweet, perfect for those hot August days. No special tools or equipment are necessary to bake this cake, though it does really help to have a stand mixer or a hand mixer. It'll just make your life a lot easier. But if you don't have that, don't fret. You're just gonna get an arm workout with some mixing and whisking. First thing is to bake our cake. This recipe is pretty big. I'm making a 4-layer cake out of 2 10-inch cakes. So it's gonna serve a boatload of people. So if you wanna cut the recipe in half to make a smaller cake, feel free. The whole recipe and the method will be in the description box below. First thing, creaming our butter and sugar. So butter and sugar in our mixer, I'm gonna get that going for a few minutes until they're light and fluffy and well incorporated. Butter and sugar are well incorporated. So I'm gonna add a full tablespoon of vanilla. About 1/2 of a vanilla pod. I've split that pod lengthwise. All I'm doing is taking the back of a knife and scraping the little black seeds out of that vanilla pod. This will provide some nice flavor, but it also provides those nice black specks that you see in things made with real vanilla. These pods are worth saving. You can make vanilla sugar, you can combine this with some sort of high-proof alcohol and make vanilla extract. My favorite is bourbon, but you can also use rum or even vodka, so save this. Now we're gonna add 4 eggs. It helps a ton to have room temperature ingredients when you're baking, especially a cake like this. So my butter has been softened, my eggs have come to room temperature. My cream has actually even been sitting out on the counter for a little bit. Even if your ingredients aren't at room temperature, you can still make a cake work just fine. But if you're a new baker or someone who needs all the help they can get, I'd recommend bringing things to room temperature. It just makes everything a lot easier. Okay, so now we combine the butter, the sugar, the vanilla, and the eggs. Perfect. Next, I'm gonna whisk together our dry ingredients. Flour, salt, baking powder. Just give these a little bit of a whisk. Now I'm gonna add our dry ingredients to our cake batter. Spilling the appropriate amount on the bench because it's not a party unless you've made a little bit of a mess. Starting very slow, I'm going to incorporate these. This is the point at which we don't want to overmix our flour. We just want to mix this until it's incorporated, then we're going to add the rest of our wet ingredients and probably even finish incorporating this by hand. So just go easy on this mix. Okay, that's plenty. At this point, our batter looks more like cookie dough than cake batter, but with the addition of a little bit of cream, a whole bunch of lemon juice, and a whole bunch of lemon zest, that's gonna change in a hurry. So here I have several tablespoons of lemon zest. You can really choose your own adventure with how lemony you want this cake to be. I love a really tangy cake, especially when we've got a whole bunch of filling coming that's pretty sweet. So lemon zest goes in. Lemon juice goes in. And our cream. Milk works here as well. In fact, I've used about 3/4 of a cup of cream and 1/4 of a cup of water just to thin the cream out a little bit. But you can use really any milk product here. Okay, and now we're gonna mix this just to combine. So I'm not gonna take this too far. I've just barely combined it. I'm gonna mix the rest by hand with my spatula. Scraping down the sides, making sure to incorporate all of that flour. Okay, that looks great. And our cake batter is done. Now all I'm gonna do is try to split this evenly into two 10-inch cake pans. These cake pans have been prepared. I've got a little bit of neutral flavored oil in the bottom, followed by a parchment round, followed by another spritz of neutral flavored oil. We just don't want our cake to stick. So, do my best to go halvesies here. Okay, our cakes are in their 10-inch pans and they are ready for the oven. So they're going into a 350-degree oven, and I will let you know how long they take when I take them out. Next on deck is vanilla buttercream. This is 2 cups of softened butter. I use salted butter, but use what you have in your fridge. So just pay attention to the taste of your buttercream if you're using salted butter and adding salt. I find that with really sweet frostings like this, you must have some salt to balance out the flavor, or it just tastes like cloyingly sweet. So salt does the job here of balancing out the flavor. Okay, so we're gonna get that butter going. It's softened, but I'm gonna get it going, whipped up a little bit, and lightened in color. Our butter has lightened in color and in texture, and it's nice and fluffy. Now I'm gonna add a full pound of powdered sugar. You can do this in shifts if you'd like, or I can show you a trick for how to make sure powdered sugar doesn't go all over your kitchen. Powdered sugar is a booger. It will go all over your kitchen if it's mixed at a speed too high. So just be really careful when you're incorporating it and when you're dealing with it in general. I have found it impossible not to spill a little bit of powdered sugar every time I work with it, so I kind of expect it. But you definitely don't want to be wearing it, and that's what will happen if you mix it on too fast a speed right when you get it going. I actually have another cup of powdered sugar on my bench to reserve after we add the cream and the vanilla. I just want to make sure I have the right texture since I am making a filled cake and the buttercream is going to serve the purpose of keeping the filling in the cake. I need to have a specific texture on this buttercream. Okay, the trick is to take a kitchen towel, cover your mixer like a magician, and just turn it on very slowly. You might even pulse it until the powdered sugar is incorporated, and then you can remove the towel. Okay, I'm gonna do a scrape down. Another mix. Okay, that's perfect. Powdered sugar is completely incorporated. Now I'm gonna add almost 2 tablespoons of vanilla extract. This is vanilla frosting, so I want it to be especially vanilla-y. That's about 1. It's about 2. To pull out all of those delicious vanilla beans, vanilla seeds. Get them all in there. Save this. Pinch of salt. And some cream. And another mix. Let's check it out. How are we doing? So buttercream is not super delicate, not as delicate as, say, flour in a baked good. You don't want to work it too much because then you develop the gluten, changes the consistency of your baked good. Buttercream is a little bit different. You do need to worry about incorporating air bubbles into the buttercream. It's really hard to get a really nice flat finish on a cake if it's full of air bubbles, but you don't need to worry too much about it. So I take my time on this step and try to get the right consistency the first time, so I'm not spending a lot of time when I'm frosting the cake adding additional milk, cream, or additional powdered sugar. So it's still looking a little bit loose for me. I'm gonna add maybe 2 tablespoons more powdered sugar, but I'm also gonna give it a taste at this point to see if I've got the salt right. Very vanilla-y, really good. It does need a little bit more salt. You'll know your buttercream needs more salt when you taste it and it just tastes kind of sickly sweet. It shouldn't taste just sweet. There should be a little bit more dimension to your buttercream than that. If you like just a really sweet buttercream, just run with that. But if you like something that tastes a little bit more balanced, a little bit more nuanced, maybe be mindful of your salt addition, that might help. So I'm gonna add another big pinch of salt. And a couple more tablespoons of powdered sugar. Again, that's just for consistency. It's definitely sweet enough, The powdered sugar helps us to get the type of consistency that we want in the buttercream. And we're gonna run the mixer one more time to get those last couple ingredients incorporated. Okay, I'm gonna give it one more taste. Much better. It's amazing how much difference just a little bit of salt makes in something so sweet. It's frosting, it should taste sweet, but you don't want it to taste overly sweet. You want it to be somewhat balanced. This buttercream is perfect. So you'll also see that it's just sticking on the end of my mixer there. It's much thicker, which is exactly what I wanted. This is also gonna go in the fridge for a while and it'll harden up and thicken up a little bit more. The reason this is important at this point is because we're making a filled cake. So you want to be really mindful of the consistency of your buttercream. Your buttercream is what's gonna hold your whole cake together, so the fillings don't let the layers slide around on each other. So the texture of your buttercream is important in this instance. So I'm gonna get our buttercream in a container and toss it in the fridge. And now it's time to make our lemon curd. Lemon curd is gonna act as one of the fillings between a couple layers of the cake. If you've ever had a lemon bar with that lemony top and the shortbread bottom, you've had lemon curd. It's delicious, it's tangy, it's sweet, it's kind of custardy because we're using a whole boatload of egg yolks. So it's pretty simple to make, it just takes a little bit of time. We're gonna use a double boiler to do this. So a double boiler is basically using a pan with simmering water and some sort of a vessel. I'm using a glass Pyrex bowl over the top. The bowl is not to touch the water. It's just a way of really gently heating what's in the bowl with steam. I would recommend against using a metal bowl or a metal whisk. That can sometimes change the taste of your lemon curd. Don't let that stop you though. If all you have is a metal whisk, use that for sure. The method is pretty easy. We combine the lemon juice, lemon zest, sugar, and eggs, and we cook them really gently in our bowl over a simmering pan of water or double boiler. Cook them really gently until they thicken. We pull it off the heat, we whisk in several tablespoons of butter. Once it's combined, we pop it in the fridge. So it just takes some time and a little bit of patience. Okay, in front of me, first step, I have 8 eggs. They're room temperature, and I'm gonna separate the whites from the yolks. If you've never done this before, it's not that difficult, it just takes some practice. So all you have to do, take your egg, crack it, put the white over a bowl, and then back and forth in the eggshell until all of the white has fallen off. And then the yolk goes into a separate container. One wrap, separate the egg into 2 halves, simply using the sharp parts of the shell. Move the yolk back and forth between the shell, letting the white fall into your bowl. So in this instance, and in a lot of instances in baking, you don't really have to worry too much if you have a little bit of white in with your yolks. It's really the opposite. When you have whites, you don't want to have yolk in with your whites. So if you're not perfect at separating your eggs, no worries, just keep practicing. Do your best to have as much yolk and as little white as is possible. So this is 8 egg yolks, and these whites I'm just gonna save. So to prep a double boiler, if you don't have a really specific double boiler pan, all you need is a saucepan that you can put some water into, and then a Pyrex heat-proof glass bowl. What you want to make sure of is that when you put your bowl into your saucepan, the water doesn't touch the bottom of your bowl, so your bowl should come out dry. If your bowl doesn't, pour a little bit of water off. We're not trying to have the boiling water in contact with the bowl, we're just using the steam to heat up our eggs really gently and to cook them. So I've got a couple cups of water, but it will really depend on the size of your saucepan and a glass bowl. So I'm gonna put this on the stove and just get it simmering. I'm actually gonna combine a few ingredients before I get it on the double boiler. So first, with my silicone whisk, I've got my lemon zest and my sugar. I like to mix those up first. Sugar is a pretty sharp crystal, and so it will cut into the lemon zest and just start releasing some of those essential oils. So about a ½ teaspoon of salt. And then we're gonna mix in our 8 egg yolks and a whole bunch of lemon juice. Just give that a whisk to combine. And the rest of this lemon curd is gonna come together over at the stove. So our water has come to a simmer, and I'm just gonna get our egg, sugar, lemon juice, lemon zest mixture over our double boiler. I am gonna grab a hot pad. Sometimes this bowl gets hot, so you just wanna watch your fingers. So now we're just gonna keep this kind of on a low, medium heat, and we're gonna whisk this constantly. It's probably gonna take about 10 minutes. What we're looking for is to cook our eggs and then for this mixture to thicken a little bit. So the telltale sign is that our mixture has thickened considerably. Lemon curd is about the consistency of a thick jam when you're finished with it. So that's what we're looking for. But keep in mind that once we put it in the fridge, it will thicken up even more. But I'm just gonna sit here and stir for the next 10 minutes or so. Okay, so we just hit 10 minutes. This looks like it's thickened up pretty nicely, but it's again hard to tell on my whisk. So what I'm gonna do is put my wooden spoon in it and run my finger down. And it's probably pretty hard to see, but that leaves a pretty perfect trail. You can see that it's thickened because of the way that it moves. It's starting to stick on the sides of the bowl and coat the sides of the bowl. It's starting to stick a little bit on the whisk. So I'm gonna call this done. 10 minutes, it's starting to thicken. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm gonna take the bowl off the double boiler, move it to something sturdy, move this away so I don't scald my arm. And then I'm gonna start mixing in, tablespoon by tablespoon, several tablespoons of butter. And the reason we're not doing this on the heat is because this mixture is hot enough that it's gonna melt all of our butter, no problem. So again, just a exercise in patience here. A tablespoon or so at a time until the butter is melted. Now you can really see that it's thickening up. Last couple tablespoons of butter. We're just gonna whisk so that these are completely combined. And this is going to go in a Tupperware, and we're gonna put it in the fridge, let it cool down. This will continue to thicken as it cools. Perfect. Super lemony. It tastes like I'm eating half of a lemon bar. Okay, that's perfectly combined. So into a Tupperware it goes, and in the fridge. So as I was making that lemon curd, I was thinking about all of the ways that it could go wrong. And one of the ways is if your eggs scramble a little bit, but all is not lost. Don't throw your lemon curd away. Take it all the way through the end, and then at the end, run it through a sieve. It's not a huge deal if you have just a couple bits of scrambled egg, and we've already invested so much in the butter and the egg yolks and the lemon. You don't want to throw that away. Keep going with it, have faith, use a sieve. You might just be okay. And we are back, day 2 of making my ultimate birthday cake. Last night, after my cakes came out and started to cool, I realized I didn't have enough cake. So I made the cakes again, but I doubled an already doubled recipe. And now we have the appropriate amount of cake for my ultimate birthday cake. So things look a little bit different. That's all that happened. I'm just prepping to get going on frosting this cake, which is my very favorite part of this whole process. I'm not sure I'm gonna have enough buttercream, so I may have to make more buttercream in the middle of this as well. But I'm gonna get going with what I've got because I know I have at least enough for a crumb coat. So the first thing I need to do is take this buttercream that's been coming to room temperature for like probably 90 minutes to 2 hours, and I'm gonna mix it back up and potentially add a little bit of cream to it to thin it out a little bit. Play with the consistency of this buttercream a little bit. It's already completely done. I don't need to mix it up really at all for anything other than the texture and consistency. So I'm gonna grab some cream out of the fridge and start whipping this buttercream up. Okay, so this is gonna be a whole bunch of work to pipe. Tons of work to pipe. So I'm gonna add just a tablespoon or 2 of cream. I don't wanna thin it out too much. Start with the tablespoon and see where that gets us. Okay, that consistency is perfect. Might be hard to tell on camera, but it's more like softened cream cheese now versus what it was before, which was closer to hard cream cheese or butter. The bonus is I get to taste some too. This is the amount of cake that I desire for my ultimate birthday cake. So the parchment even stayed in this one. Perfect, exactly what we want. So I'm gonna take these cakes out of the cake tins, pull the parchment off, and we're gonna do some trimming. So with each of these, I want to end up with 2 layers from each cake, and I'm actually going to cut off the top to make a flat layer on the top. So I'll show you this first cake just flat on my bench, because most people won't have a turntable, but I'll show you the second cake on my cake decorating turntable so you can see how I use that tool as well. So the best way to trim a cake, from my estimation, is to get down on the level of the cake, at the lowest side of the cake, and hold my knife parallel to my bench, so flat, and just start trimming around the cake, trying to keep my knife as flat as I can. The goal here is to take the hump that's in the center of this cake off of it to have nice, clean cake layers. So you can save all of this, mix it with some frosting, put it on a stick, call it a cake pop. So let's see how we did. Not super flat yet, but I've made a few cakes in my day. So what I realize is that it just takes some practice. Not perfect, but good enough for us. Hold my knife parallel, gore, and then I'm just trying to meet my line, and then it becomes much easier after you've met your line. So you can see I'm a little bit more skilled at making a cake flat when I have my trusty turntable. It does make it a little bit easier. Okay, but if you can't get them perfectly flat, buttercream fixes pretty much every ill. So no need to worry about it. Now I won't usually do this, but I am gonna do it on this cake. I'm gonna cut the bottom off as well. I just want those layers to be lemon curdy and raspberry-y and not have the discolored of the cake that touched the pan. But that's an aesthetic thing only. Not necessary at all. And I'm only trying to cut off the tiniest little bit. This side of the cake is already flat, obviously, since it was in contact with the pan. There we go. Same thing with this one. Our cake tastes delicious. Okay, we're not completely out of the crummy situation yet. We have to have these cakes. I need to be a little bit more gentle with them now because we're thinning them out. To have a cake, to make 2 layers out of 1 cake, same process as trimming off the top and the bottom. I'm just gonna eyeball the middle of the cake and drag my knife all the way around, just scoring it and seeing how well I do that first time, just a really light score. If I don't hit my line or it doesn't look perfectly level, I can always try again. But because we've taken the top and the bottom off of the cake, we want to try to make this part as level as possible just to make our job easiest when we're frosting. So I'm going to eyeball halfway and then just score. So a turntable makes things so much easier. But you don't need one. You can do this by hand. Plenty of people do. Okay, that was great. I hit my line. So now I'm just like applying a little bit more pressure on that guideline that I drew the first time around. There are lots of tools for this. In fact, I have one. It's basically a wire that you're cutting the cake with. But I've not found anything that works as well, for me at least, as a turntable and a serrated knife. So I'm all the way through. I'm going to be very gentle with these layers though, because the cake is heavy and I don't want to break the layers. In fact, I'm actually going to use a cake round, which I'm transporting this cake to a party, so I've got to put it on a cake round. So I'm going to use the cake round to slide it onto to preserve our layers. Perfect. One more to go. All the way through. Crummy situation number 2. Be right back to you. We are mostly decrumbed, and I think that we're ready. The first thing I'm going to do is fill a piping bag with a little bit of buttercream. This is to create the dam around each of the layers. All a piping bag is is a plastic triangular shaped bag. You can use a Ziploc bag for this. In fact, I wanted to do that for you to show you how to use a Ziploc bag, but I don't have any big Ziploc bags. So a piping bag it is, but it's really the same thing. This comes with a full tip. We're gonna cut the tip off. That's exactly what you do with a large Ziploc bag. You'd force your frosting to one corner, twist the end of it, and cut the tip off to use it as a piping bag. So all I do is put my hand inside the piping bag or the Ziploc, put it inside a glass or a quart takeout container or some sort of tall container, and then stand it up. We do that for two reasons. One, to create a stable base to fill the piping bag, but two, we roll it over so that the frosting stays in the piping bag, doesn't get on the outside of it. Put your hand underneath and hold the piping bag that way, and that way you can kind of work together with yourself to fill your piping bag. So we could actually put all of our frosting in the piping bag if we wanted to. I just want to make sure I have enough that I can frost all of my layers. And then all you do is roll the piping bag up over your frosting. And twist. You don't want to go too crazy because now I've got some air trapped in the end, which is fine, it's not a big deal. But with the air trapped in the end, it could easily split the piping bag. So I'm then going to cut off just a little chunk. I like to start with less than more so that I can continue cutting, but once you've cut too much, you can't go back. So I'm going to cut off probably about 1/2 inch. And then all I do, I'm twisting the bottom here, and it's forcing the buttercream down my piping bag. I'm gonna get it just about to the end, and then I twist it and toss it back in my glass, and that's where my buttercream stays. Now, I'm sure there are much more professional ways to do this, and I would encourage you to watch all of the YouTube videos you want. One of my goals of this channel is to inspire you to experiment and try things that you might not be perfect at. I am not a professional baker, nor am I a perfect cake decorator. But every time I learn something and I come out with a product that I can be proud of because I made it and I know it's delicious, so I would encourage you to do the same thing. Okay, so get rid of this little plastic piece. You don't want that to end up in your cake. If I had to recommend one single tool to purchase for cake decorating, beyond cake pans, it would be an offset spatula. A turntable is nice. Cake rounds are nice, piping bags are nice, but really all you need is an offset spatula. An offset spatula can scoop, it can spread, it can help get in nooks and crannies, and I would go for a small one over a big one. This one has its uses, but the small one is where everything starts for me. So my best tip, icing a cake, to get a stable base is to put a tiny little bit of icing directly on your turntable. What that's going to do is ensure that our cake round doesn't slide around. So, cake round is next. So, cake round centered on the bottom of our turntable. Another tiny little bit of buttercream on our cake round to keep our cake secure. This is interesting. We've got a big crack in this cake here. I'm going to employ a tool called a cake mover because this cake I don't want to crack. Just really a big spatula. So I'm going to slide it between the layers of cake. This is not my bottom layer. That might be my top layer. I want a nice solid layer for my bottom layer. So I'm going to use this layer. And then I want to center it on the cake round. So the best practice when filling a cake is to apply a light layer before you apply the filling. So I'm gonna try to be really light with my crumb coat and with my filling layer because we've got a lot of cake to cover since I quadrupled this recipe. And I think I'm gonna run out of buttercream. So the reason you want to apply buttercream before you apply filling on a filled cake is so that the filling doesn't seep into the cake. It's not the end of the world if that happens, but you want to just make sure that you give your cake a chance to be stable. And one of those ways is what we're going to do next. So when I start a new piping bag, I actually like to pipe a little bit back into my frosting bowl because there's air bubbles because of the way I filled it. It'll ensure that you get a little bit better of a line to start. And you can test the width of your line as well. That's much better. So again, I'm not a professional, This is just the way I've done this. So I hold the bag and I pipe my line, trying to keep it consistent all the way around. I would rather too much here than too little. So make sure if there are any little holes, you cover those holes with buttercream. Okay, so we have our cake dam piped. Now, since my lemon curd is out, I'm gonna add a little layer of lemon curd. I don't want a ton of filling here. My goal is not to like jelly donut style fill this. I just want a few tablespoons so that there's a nice lemony taste in the middle. So you'll see I'm using the back of a spoon here to move the lemon curd around. And keep in mind, if I've done my job correctly, my buttercream dam is gonna extend taller than my lemon curd. Next, if you don't have a big cake mover, you can use a couple spatulas. It's a tool that's in my kitchen, so I'm gonna use it. We want to place our cake as close to directly on top as is possible. We did pretty well. Now, if some of the buttercream oozes out, no problem at all. And then we're just gonna repeat that process. So we go in with a little bit of a crumb coat. Light layer of frosting is on. And now I'm gonna pipe the dam around the outside. Our raspberry jam. This has been sitting out for just a little bit, but I'll probably still, have to give it a stir. And we repeat. Next cake layer goes on. So you've seen me do this twice. I'm gonna speed through it and I'll get back to you when all of the cake layers are on. Or if something unforeseen happens between now and then, I'll get back to you then. So there are some little gaps where the frosting has not squeezed out, particularly right there, of the layers. And I just wanna fill those in and then use the buttercream to cover the rest of the cake. Again, a crumb coat is meant to keep the crumbs in because this layer of cake, you can see it all over my bench and I've had to clean up from crumbs several times. But because this layer of cake is really crummy and you don't want that in your end frosting, you put a layer of frosting on as the sacrificial layer. I'm just going to use my piping bag to fill in any of those little areas that are lacking buttercream. That's pretty good actually. And then I'm just gonna get rid of the rest of the buttercream because I'm gonna use it all for the crumb coat. So the rest of the buttercream goes on. It's a little bit soft, which is the reason I'm putting it on the top of the cake instead of on the sides of the cake, because this baby needs to go back in the fridge ASAP. But I wanna try to finish the crumb coat first. The reason the buttercream in the piping bag is looser than the buttercream that was in the bowl is because I was handling that. It was in my hand for a good portion of its life in that piping bag. So it's really loose. If it gets to this point and you're a little bit sketched out, toss your cake in the fridge. The fridge is your best friend at this point. Okay, so most of it is pretty well covered. I'm kind of working against myself at this point because this buttercream frosting is so soft. And our cake is gonna go chill in the fridge for probably a good 30 minutes to an hour while I make more buttercream. Be back to you in a minute. It is a few hours later and beyond time to finish this ultimate birthday cake. I did have to make another batch of buttercream. So I've been thinking about how I want to decorate this cake, and because my maths weren't mathing, and we only did 3 layers, 2 of lemon curd and 1 of raspberry, I want to include some raspberry on the outside of the cake. So I'm going to do the risky maneuver to freeform it. I've not decorated a cake like this before, but the idea came to me while I was thinking about another recipe on my brain and marbling 2 colors together. So that's what we're going to try to do today. And the buttercream is super hard. It feels like it's pretty rock solid. The best practice for a 4-tier cake is actually to stake it. So you use either cake stakes or plastic straws or even wooden dowels to keep your cake layers together. But I feel really confident in the fact that this cake has spent most of its life in the fridge by this point. So I think we're all good just to continue decorating it. So you've seen me do this before. I'm just gonna add the buttercream to the cake and decorate away. So I always like to start on the top of a cake like this, get it really well covered, and then move the buttercream down the sides. So you'll see me just really working on getting the top flat and smoothing the buttercream towards the sides. So now I'm just trying to cover the edges. So I'm just using my offset spatula and holding it at an angle to the cake and using the turntable. These turntables are not that expensive and they're a game changer. You can frost a cake without them, of course. You can do everything by hand. Okay, we're pretty well covered. Now I'm gonna do the risky maneuver of dolloping some jam on. And I'm gonna use my spatula to kind of marble and drag it around a little bit. I like that, I think it's pretty. So I'm gonna do the same thing on the sides. We've got to have a piece, right? Time to cut into it. The moment of truth. Well, 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 happy birthday to me. This looks amazing. Lemon curd, raspberry filling, vanilla buttercream, lemon cake. 3 layers of filling, 4 layers of cake. We made my ultimate birthday cake. I will happily share this with my friends, and I will probably freeze a fair amount of it. Cake freezes really well. If those anniversary cakes that people are still eating like 20 years later are any indication, all you have to do is double wrap it in some plastic. You can do it individually, you can freeze a whole cake. I like to do individual slices, and when I have a sweet tooth or I want to relive my ultimate summer birthday cake, pull a piece out, put it on your counter for a couple hours, let it defrost. Thank you for being here with me to help me celebrate my birthday a little bit early. If you want to see more from me, please subscribe to my channel. Please let me know in the comments what your birthday cake selection would be. I'd love to maybe try to recreate it. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it. Hope to see you soon. Cheers.